Hey, this is Vu, and one of the most commonly asked questions I get on this channel is how do I consistently carry? Well, it's not always possible, but I'd like to take a look at the keys in my mind to carrying as often as possible to get rank ups and hopefully become a better player as well. And before we go any further, I'd like to thank our sponsor, xplay.gg. Xplay runs a set of CSGO servers, one of which is bots. Bots is essentially a deathmatch with 3 levels of difficulty. Medium level is good for newer players or a more relaxed time with bots that have a 650 millisecond aim speed. Hard level bots have a 450 millisecond aim time, and for players looking for an extreme challenge, cheater bots have a 350 millisecond aim speed, which is incredibly challenging. These servers are actually very interesting as the bots don't play anything like bots you would typically expect. They won't shoot you in the back. You've got advanced stats if you hold down E, and there are even challenges on their website where you can earn free skins. And the first one, and the most obvious one, really is to understand when and how you can turn a play into a round win. This is kind of the key to having high impact. Not all kills are created equal, and you need to understand that. And the most obvious way to describe that, if you don't understand the concept, if the opponents here on CT have one player playing B alone, and they have their cat player who's just been spotted in middle, and you kill this B player, well, all of a sudden you can get full B control. You can set up into a pretty hard to deal with spot like bench here. You can even smoke off market doorway, so it's incredibly hard for your opponents to rotate in. The bomb can come over, you plant the bomb, and B is a very hard site to retake, so you have essentially put your team in an advantage situation right off the bat. That's a high impact kill, as long as you work off of it, as long as you go into B and take that control. And I want to take a look at a few plays from the king of entry fragging himself, Yekindar, to show when he goes in and when he stays back and the reasons he does that. So the first one here, Yekindar is going to be making his way towards mid, and he's actually going to get kind of caught off by this AWPer, but he seems very ready for it. He just hits a nice shot. Now, the key to this situation is that he killed the AWPer there. If he had killed the rifler, this would have been a little bit different, but when he kills the AWPer, he can try to protect that AWP because his opponent might go for it, and when he tries to protect the AWP, he spots a second player. Now, if you just think of what setups teams are likely to play, and this is something you should always be having in your mind, generally your opponents are probably playing 3A with one of them covering apartments, or sometimes they'll be playing 2A and 3B. And in both of those scenarios, arch side is going to be completely empty here because why would you have 2 mid, 1 arch? And that means he can beat the rotate inside of arch. He walks at the right timing, gets himself a kill on drop, and then he knows csgo is there because csgo had already made a footstep, so he gets himself a 3rd kill. And this is Yekindar just turning 1 opening kill, which is probably something, maybe a bit of an anti-strat, but just a play you wouldn't necessarily see all the time. He uses the information he has available to him to take a calculated risk. Now, with this round, they're going to make contact in a situation where many players or teams would force out and try and take control, but they're not going to. And the thing to keep in mind here is information, because they actually played a strat specifically designed so Yekindar would get in ahead of the player jumping across, and he would have 2 players at the back of alt mid that didn't get spotted. So they're not giving any information over to Furia, and the goal is either they catch a player pushed up thinking alt mid is clear, or hopefully they walk towards balcony, then make contact. In this case though, Yekindar makes contact there, and he knows up until this point he could chase. If Safe was still on balcony, if Yekindar had caught him backing up the graveyard or just failing to jump off the balcony correctly, they could have got that kill and immediately tried to go into the bomb site. However, once he gets away to safety, pun intended, he's going to be able to delay for long enough, and he's going to have teammates pivoting over from both short and long A. And when they pivot, it's going to end up getting them killed if they try and force out. So because they made contact so far from balcony, they have to cancel this. Then they could wait a little bit longer here. They end up going back out balcony anyways. I think they could wait a little longer. Maybe Furia would have pivoted. but instead they go fairly quickly. Fury is somewhat ready for it, and Yekindar kind of gets caught at just the exact wrong moment. But the important thing to keep in mind for that play specifically, if they had made contact closer to balcony, then they probably bust out immediately. However, because they made contact so far away, they know that gives plenty of time for the rotate to get into position, and instead of trying to bust on the bomb site, they chase down the potential for a kill up until the point when it doesn't make sense anymore, and then they back up and then they re-execute. But that's basically a whole new strat. The next one that not enough people understand is that crosshair placement is consistency. Look, when you're flicking to targets, you are never going to be fully consistent. That's always going to vary day by day, and you're just never going to find true consistency. However, if you peek out aiming directly at someone and all you have to do is click, that is how you find consistency. Now, obviously, your opponents are trying to put themselves in positions where you can't do that type of thing, but if you're playing weaker players, you can often just methodically clear out every angle one by one with perfect crosshair placement, and you will actually end up getting a ton of kills, even if you couldn't move your mouse to some extent. If you're playing in silver, you may actually find you can get a ton of kills. This is the key. And while this may be obvious to some of you, what might not be obvious is something I'll call crosshair cushioning, where when you peek an angle, you're looking right at where they're going to be in the exact right spot. However, when you're holding an angle waiting for an opponent to peek out on you, instead of holding this narrow where you're likely to have to flick over to shoot your opponent swinging out, you aim a little bit off from the corner, not a lot, just a little bit, to make sure that when they strafe into the angle, you actually get the kill. Now, the tip I had actually at the very top of this list when I made it, but I moved sneakily into the middle so people didn't instantly click off when I said duoing is really the most effective way to have any level of consistency in terms of carrying. Realistically, it's going to be very hard with variance. You're going to have teammates that are so bad they are simply impossible to carry. That's where the 60-20-20 rule comes from. However, if you have a teammate with you, not only are you decreasing the variance and you always have a player that's most likely going to be good, he might have off games as might you, but he's generally going to be good. But also, it allows you to actually start playing as a team. I find oftentimes when I try to coordinate with my teammates, that's when everything falls over like a freaking Jenga tower. I go, I'm going to flash for you. And they go, what? Where? And they get full whited by it. Oh, it's just the most tilting thing ever. It's a rant at this point. Anyways, when you have a teammate, you can do a lot of duo plays that you would want to do with random teammates, but simply never really happens. And to go over a couple of them here, one of my favorite ones is actually this play here. So I'll have a teammate top banana. Their team will have smoked him off, hopefully no gap that they could be spamming you through. I tell him to go into this smoke with his own smoke out. So he's ready to smoke CT. I throw a flash for him, and he smokes CT and runs in. So I just throw a flash very quickly. He's here, smokes, and runs in with that flash. And very often, especially when you're playing matchmaking, your opponents are playing angles like this. They're playing angles like this. They're playing angles like this. All these angles where not only are you going to get blind by that flash, but also you don't really have a clear fallback path, right? If you're playing somewhere over here, or you're playing second oranges or new box, if you get blinded, you go to cover and you're safe. But most people in matchmaking on the T side, well, they don't really throw flashes like that, which means on CT side, you don't really have to worry about flashes like that. You have to worry much more about people swinging in with two players just trying to outduel you, and you play angles that are, make sense in that regard. And then the other thing that can be really effective on Inferno specifically is duoing B. I find it is extremely hard to play B as a solo queue player because you need coordination to play B, and you never have it. I find B on Inferno is probably the least consistently held, or really most consistently lost bomb site on any map. And my ability to attack B on T side is why on Faceit over like 300 games, I have a 68% win rate on Inferno. I take B very often. I also lose B very often on CT side because I don't play B unless I'm queued, in which case you can absolutely dominate. And I would say as a duo, Inferno may just be the best map to carry. With real consistency, you can probably do it. On the same page, you need to have some solo plays if you're not going to be playing with a duo. And so what you want to do with these solo plays, I have a full video on the topic, but, you know, doing things where you can mitigate as many angles as possible where you have to peek into multiple players at the same time. And Inferno is a great map because just off of one player worth of utility, you can try and control Banana. You can get a decent amount of control of Banana, and then, you know, while you do have to end up in this position here where you could get flash peeked or they could peek from corner and sandbags, you know, you can realistically get control of Banana in a pug environment a pretty good portion of the time with one player worth of utility. That's why I love this map in general. Really, I'm not saying you have to do any of these plays specifically. I'm just saying get plays that you're comfortable with and that don't expose you to a bunch of angles at the same time where you just consistently die, and try and run those fairly often so that you can get a feel for a bunch of different ways that your opponents can counter it, how you can counter those counters, and all that sort of thing. Now, the next one kind of goes hand in hand with knowing when you can turn a play into a round win, which is be willing to lead your team onto the site. I see so many people, when they play pugs, they think they need to bait and try and be the last man standing. And while it's nice to imagine that you're Cold Zera, I think more often than not, your teammates default into baiting more than they default into entry fragging, because not because they're being malicious, or sometimes they are, but oftentimes it's just that they don't really feel confident going forward into the bomb site. They're more comfortable holding angles, as is natural, right? So if you lead them in and you go in first, while you may die a little bit more often, you will, in my opinion, have a better impact on your team to actually win those rounds. And now I'm not saying you want to run in and just completely sacrifice yourself, but I am saying, you know, if you're at a bottleneck at top Banana here, don't be afraid to be the first guy going in and leading the charge. You know, you don't have to run straight in. You can be clearing angles as you go. You know, you can be trying to play it smart if you can, but I think leading in is oftentimes the solution to teams that always bait, which is most teams in pugs. The AWPing problem, right? Everyone thinks the AWP is overpowered, and while I staunchly disagree that the AWP is overpowered, or at least I don't think it's significantly overpowered, I do think when it comes to pugs, on average, AWPs are very easy to use and your opponents have no idea how to counter them. So it's great if you can counter them on your T side, and I'll get to that in a second, but on your CT side, I think being a hybrid is probably the best thing to do. By hybrid, of course, I mean you can pick up the AWP or rifle. You don't want to be a pure AWPer, in my opinion. I think especially when you're playing at lower levels, it kind of stunts your growth because it's so easy against weak opponents. But also, in games when you're getting dominated, if you can't rifle, you're never really going to have an AWP, or you get an AWP and they take the other bomb site and you just lose it immediately, right? I think being able to be a hybrid is probably your best bet if you're truly trying to carry. Now, dealing with an AWPer is a different story. And again, this is one of those things that's much easier to do with a duo, because part of the problem is you don't have enough utility to clear out all of the angles correctly when you're solo queuing, when you don't have coordination, when you don't have someone back here throwing a window flash for you, all of this stuff. You can only mitigate the advantages that AWPers have on you and try not to give away too many openings. But I mean, how many openings is too many openings? It's really hard to say, and you can't really, you can't manage it perfectly on your own is the problem, right? On T side, the best advice I can give is to jiggle peek angles effectively, and that means, you know, if you can see the AWPer, if I can see this angle, that AWPer can kill me. So this is a jiggle peek for that angle, right? Not this, just to keep that in mind. Jiggle peek angles when you think AWPers could be there, and just keep on top of the concept of how many AWPs do your opponents have, where are those AWPs located, and try and work around that as much as possible, instead of just running around like a headless chicken and getting yourself killed consistently. And the final thing that I'm going to recommend here is to not hold static angles on CT side as a rifler. And that means holding statically in angles where your opponents are likely to clear you. This is still something people do far too often, even though I've mentioned this in many videos now. For example, this angle here or this angle here are both not great because you have a player here. As a T, you are simply going to clear this angle. You're going to be pre-aiming it with ping. You're going to have an advantage. And even outside of the ping advantage and the peeker's advantage that you have, there's also just kind of a psychological advantage where the T's head could be at a bunch of different locations, but the CT's head kind of can't, right? He's kind of in that location that you know exactly where you're pre-aiming it. The T could be crouching. You know, a lot of things can go wrong where the peeker has an advantage outside of just ping, which is just an advantage on top of everything else. The way to mitigate that in most of these scenarios is, well, op or play delay repeaks. Maybe you're thinking of something like platform here on Dust 2, or even potentially pit on Dust 2, where you would probably be kind of crouching and uncrouching, but really platform is more the type of angle I'm thinking, where they will be peeking out looking directly at you as they clear this angle, and what you do is you try and catch them when they move on. So a T-side player here peeks out, clears this, then clears this, then clears this, and you catch this guy as he's clearing this. You can also hold it even more passively. You can be holding it, you know, as they get out to elbow, and at elbow, they're probably looking towards car. You shoot them in the side, but a delay repeak is where you hold the angle for a little bit, you peek out, check it, nobody's there, you back up, wait, check, and so really your idea is that you're catching the T after he thinks he's cleared your angle, but actually you're there just a couple of seconds later. This is a very easy way to get kills if your opponents are working picks, which is a very common thing that opponents very often do in pugs and matchmaking in general. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.